Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Vann. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution by teaching you about mental health, emotional intelligence, and hand over the life lessons that you may not have learned up until now. These are the conversations that guide you into empowering who you are while learning to live your most grounded, authentic, and balanced life. What does it mean to stay with yourself? Those are profound words with even more significant life implications. Staying with yourself involves personal integrity and self-respect. It means understanding and standing up for your beliefs and values and not yielding to the expectations of others. It's a trueness that's raw, deep, and unquestionable. But how does one do just that? I sat down with meditation teacher and coach Jessica Amos to talk about the ins and outs of self-discovery, staying with yourself, and leaning into the practices that feed you on every level, not just the one that you show the outside world. It's a riveting conversation filled with drops of wisdom and practices that you can use right now to create a more fulfilled you. So let's get right to it. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. I am so excited today to talk about the shadow self, staying present in the self, what that means and how that is relative to getting our lives together and keeping our lives together, which is a massive topic. Jessica, I'm so excited to have you on. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and let's talk shadows.
Perfect. Yes. Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm Jessica Amos. I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. And I've been diving into the shadow long before we ever had this phrase, shadow work and going into the shadow. I started a company called Stay With Yourself many years ago while going through what I'm calling my second awakening. And stay with yourself to me means the practice of being who you are, where you are, honoring yourself in each moment. So I offer coaching and courses and support for people in order to learn to stay with themselves and honor where they are in their life right now through presence, mindfulness, meditation, and definitely some humor.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
We should never get through our life without humor for any reason whatsoever. The phrase stay with yourself, it hits me right in the center of my chest. And I think it would definitely do that for most people. What does that mean to you? How can we relate to that other than this warm feeling that it creates?
That's a great question. I mean, the best thing I have is a story. So
Right.
I got this phrase back before I got divorced, we were going to marriage counseling, doing what we could to see if we could make it work. And on our way to the counseling session, we stop at Pete's Coffee to get some coffee, make a little date out of it. I order black coffee. He takes his coffee and just starts walking towards the door, while I'm still needing to put cream and sugar and stuff in my coffee. And it was just so frustrating to me. I was having this moment, and it was indicative of kind of where we were in the relationship. I was feeling ditched. I was feeling like we weren't together. I wanted him to wait for me. I had all these I was upset. And then we were on our way to counseling. So that was the first thing I brought up. I was like, he's always ditching me.
Right.
He's not, he didn't wait for me while I needed to put doctor at my coffee. And my therapist, he was a great therapist. He looks at me and he goes, Jessica, it seems to me like you maybe need to learn to stay with yourself. And I was like, what? What is
Right.
that? What is that? What do you mean? And he's like, well, your husband's going to do what he's going to do. And you have every right to take your time, to take care of yourself, to stay with yourself, to take care of what you need to take care of for yourself. If you want to take all the time in the world to put cream and sugar in your coffee, you get to do that. You don't have to rush to catch up. And it just was so simple and absolutely mind blowing to me
Hmm.
to have
Hmm.
permission to not be like constantly adjusting myself
Right.
to the people around me and the world around me. So to stay with
Hmm.
myself, it became everything. And then it's how I base my entire wellness and business model off of that single
It's
moment.
isn't it amazing? I know as a therapist, somebody will say, "Well, you said to me, and that was the catalyst for X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "Wow, I don't even remember saying that." But those beautiful moments like that, just stay with yourself. Ladies, you don't need to hear anything else today. That's it. We're gonna wrap it up now. It's so amazing, really. So you said the second go around, your second enlightenment. Can
Mhm.
we talk about that for a second? Because this must have been in the first part, and now we're moving into something else.
Yeah, so I would say that like my first kind of awakening
Mhm,
happened around the time I got pregnant with
mm,
my daughter, my firstborn. I was 24 when I got pregnant, and that was about the time I really started to reflect on what I wanted to give my child. I really had to start actually facing
yeah,
my own childhood, my own patterns, my own life, what I wanted to bring my child into. I
right,
knew that I couldn't give her anything I couldn't give myself.
right,
So, and I didn't want to. When she was born, I was taking her back to visit family, and it wasn't feeling like I wanted to be bringing her into
right,
some of these environments and some of these old patterns. And it's fine for me growing up. I was what I was used to, but for
right.
her, it needed to be different. And I would call that my first awakening. It's where I really started to grieve like the way I
Mhm,
grew up and some things from my childhood and some of those like losses and really starting to acknowledge, come into consciousness. And even
mhm,
then around some of my own patterns. So setting boundaries was starting to become a practice and that kind of thing. So that's what I call my first awakening. And my
mhm,
second awakening was around the time that I was going through that transition in my marriage. And I was starting to wake up to even some deeper patterns. Okay, fine, I've been setting boundaries. Fine, I've been grieving. Fine, I've been
mhm,
acknowledging the past, but I was still angry, frustrated, passive aggressive, finding myself feeling like I needed to hide or lie. I had people pleasing tendencies,
mhm,
codependent tendency, all of the things. So that's where kind of the second awakening started to happen. That's when I came to meditation practice
yeah,
and was awakened through more of a true inner change. So that
mhm.
was like the second awakening that I would say.
One of the
Yeah.
most beautiful things that I love about this podcast, and especially the ladies and some of the gentlemen that we have come on, is the alignment that happens. I mean, you just described my own personal background, which obviously is the next step to saying we all have shadows. We all have the shadow self. When we're learning to stay with ourselves, one of the hardest things to do is to turn around and face
Mm,
what came before it.
mhm,
What is the shadow self?
mm.
That is the question.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I love it. So simple and it can get very complicated
Absolutely.
depending on where you go. So to me, the shadow self is those parts of ourselves that have remained kind of hidden or in the shadows from like our conscious. They're like kind of more in our subconscious, our unconscious selves. I know that for me, I have like tendencies towards depression. I have a
Mhm.
lot of sad girl vibes going on, a lot of deep emotional depth and like all these things.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of that, some of that depth dwells in the shadows and the things that have happened to
Right.
us that we've internalized, that we haven't acknowledged. So to me,
Mhm.
it's just more the unconscious aspects of ourselves that maybe even play out without our conscious awareness in our
Mhm.
life. Yeah.
Mhm. The things that we were taught, gave permission to, whether we realized it or not, and they find their way into our daily activities.
Hmm.
How I like to describe it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too, when somebody's sitting in front of me and they're like, "But I don't understand why I'm doing it." Those are the exact things that you should be pinpointing. If you don't
Hmm.
know why you're doing it and it's irritating you, you're finding it frustrating, you know that it's a quote problem,
Yeah.
those are the shadows.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I love that. The
Yeah.
the things that we don't know why. If you
Yeah.
find yourself being like, I don't know what is going on? I don't know
Mhm.
why. There's this thing, it keeps happening.
Yeah.
That's where we step forward with sort of that brave vulnerability and that
Mhm.
courage, like you said, to
Yeah.
face ourselves.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's a terrifying thing and one of the most beautiful and relieving experiences I've had.
Mhm.
I continue to
Mhm.
have in my life, and it's actually one of the things that meditation has brought to me as well too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things for me too. That's really, for everyone who listens to the podcast regularly, meditation is how my whole life shifted, and it sounds like yours as well.
Mhm.
It's one of those clearing aspects that you realize if I just sit, if I stay with myself for just a
Mhm.
moment,
Mhm.
this may be the tornado that clears the pathway.
Totally. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I haven't heard it put like that, like this might
Mhm.
be the tornado that clears the pathway, but
Mhm.
it feels like it's a tornado. It's
Yeah.
this all of this, and a lot of times you can feel it when you sit with it. It'll come up in you and it's can feel
Mhm.
difficult to hold, but if you can allow it to move through, the path really does get cleared. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm stealing that.
Please. Please do. Absolutely do. It's one of the most remarkable things. Let's talk a little bit about meditation and the way that you use it, and because it's all different, right? And
Mhm.
for me as a behavioral therapist, somebody who uses meditation daily, it's one of those things that I will say, you don't always have to be calm and quiet in meditation.
Mm.
It's okay to allow those things to fall in your lap, pick them up, hold them,
Mhm.
decide what you're going to do with it, and then work through it. It's okay. It doesn't have to be that Zen state. We want you there,
Right.
but you kind of have to go through the woods first.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I love talking about this. Those Zen states, those states that just feel like, oh,
Yeah.
heaven opening up. Those are more like feel like accidental. Like
Yes.
I just like kind of stumble into them by accident. But
Right.
the big thing about meditation
Hmm.
is showing up to it no matter what. Like
Yes.
being willing to show up. I don't know what is going to come up today. And
Right.
sometimes I think I'm going to sit and I can't wait to sit because I'm going to work some things out.
Yeah.
Like I have some things that I've been thinking about that I can't wait to keep thinking about. And if I just give myself a minute to just sit and think about it for a minute, it's all going to
Mhm.
get I sit down and meditate, and that's not what happens.
Right.
All sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, sometimes it's peaceful, sometimes I find myself suddenly standing in my kitchen going, I was just sitting on my mat a minute
Yeah.
ago and I don't know how I got here. Like I just
Yeah.
sort of like went I
Yes.
just like dissociated and got up and left my mat. That's
Yeah.
happened before at times.
Mhm.
But the point of it to me, I think the really powerful part of meditation is the willingness to show up to it
Yeah.
every day or
Yeah.
consistently on some
Mhm.
level, no matter what happens
Mhm.
there. And in
Uh-huh.
that you become familiar, you begin to become familiar with your
Mhm.
shadow, with the things that are there. You start to see your patterns. You go,
Yeah.
this keeps coming up and this kind of looks like that. And you actually can begin to
Mhm.
know yourself, like know thyself, like really
Mhm.
be aware
Yeah.
of how you're made and all your little
Mhm.
intricacies.
Yeah. The nuances of the self.
Hmm. Yeah.
I always love it when people come back and they go, "I sat there and I just was overcome with emotion, so much so that I almost felt sick and all I could do was cry." And I'm like, "Fantastic." And they're like, "No, it was awful." I'm like, "No, it was fantastic. That is fantastic. What are you talking about? It's
That's
all."
all I did when I started meditating. When I first
Yeah.
started meditating, that's all I did for months is I would sit down
Yeah.
and start crying. I just
Yeah.
cried for months
Yeah.
and months when I first started meditating.
And
Yeah.
it's so cleansing and it's so beautiful. And we're told so often, stay away from the emotions. Don't sit with it. Just forget about it. Release it. Do not cry.
Hmm.
That's your soul level giving you permission to walk through, right? And that is the tornado. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit more about how we stay with ourselves. What do you teach Talk to us about that because I think it's so important. We're using the vehicle as meditation, but I know that there's so much more.
Totally. Yeah, I love this. To me, I mean, the way that I've sort of shown up to this work and I teach it and I talk about it is I
Mhm.
love making this kind of inner peace and sense of
Mm.
belonging to yourself accessible all the time and
Mm.
every moment in everyday life, no matter what
Yeah.
is happening, you know, and in the midst of the fact that life is messy and full of things. So I love, my favorite thing is talking about the hard to talk about topics. Like
Mhm.
my most recent course I released is on healing your relationship with money.
Yeah.
And for years, I was asking Insight Timer, can I want to release a course on money, on healing. They're like, we can't use the word money. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, we can't use the word money, then we need this course even better, more than
Yeah,
we think we do,
exactly.
right? And then they finally
Exactly.
changed their tune and we could use the word money. And I'm talking about divorce and when relationships end. I'm talking about boundaries. I'm
Mhm.
talking about shadow work. I'm talking about inner child healing. I'm
Yeah.
talking about presence on the simpler things. I'm coming into alignment with yourself and with the seasons and understanding that, of course, you feel this way in the winter time because it's winter time. And let's understand
Mhm.
that not everything is happening because there's something wrong with us. There's
Right.
also things happening in the world. So when I talk about staying with yourself and the way that I work with people, it's always very much about like, let's get in there into the,
Mhm.
let's not pretend that life is just this, we're skipping along all the time. Or
Yeah.
how can we be present and peaceful and,
Mhm.
in have a sense of self-possession
Mm.
in the midst of whatever's happening.
Those 2 words together. I use
Mm,
the word self-authority a lot,
mm, mhm,
but self-possession
mhm,
is huge.
mhm,
It's I have to sit with it for a second. It's one of those pieces where in fact, I love the alignment of this. I was asked earlier today, what's the one thing that you see most often where
mhm,
people really struggle and it's they don't own themselves? So,
mm.
self-possession, what does that mean to you?
I love this phrase self-possessed. I've
Yeah.
used it with people before. I'm like, that's just kind of how I am. I'm pretty self-possessed. It
Yeah.
means that all parts of myself belong to me.
Mm,
When I say it, like, I imagine someone who's self-possessed in a, say, a chaotic situation or emergency situation, and they can hold their shit together, right?
right.
There's like a sense of self-possession. They're not
Right.
spilling all over the place.
Yeah.
And even some, there's like a dignity to
Mhm.
self-possession. And in meditation, we're taught that a lot is like be sort of in a relaxed, upright, dignified
Yeah.
posture, relaxed but dignified, so you can be open but you
Mhm.
belong to yourself. You're not spilling out everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
also not taking everything on. So
Mhm.
there's like this very, I don't know, I like to use a garden analogy around that a
Mhm.
lot. It's like there's a fence around it. You're verdant, you're well kept, you're not
Yeah.
spilling out everywhere. And
Mhm.
yeah, I love it as a phrase, as a term.
Yeah, I love it too. I think that if we looked up staying with ourselves in the dictionary, that would be the actual definition,
Right.
self-possessed. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fantastic.
Hmm.
It's you're speaking of permission, ownership. One of the most difficult things for people to do is
Hmm.
to own themselves in a way
Hmm.
that they do create boundaries, that they do make people this is the biggest thing I want you guys to hear, earn them. We
Mm.
have to make people earn us in a certain way,
Mm.
right? I mean, that's what a
Mhm.
boundary is, other than teaching people how to treat us. Thoughts on that?
Mm. I have never heard it put that way so much as earned. I mean, I guess I've heard sort of this idea of, people needing to earn the right for you to
Mhm.
like share your deepest parts with
Sure.
it, like
Right.
to be sure that you can
Yeah.
trust them. When I think about boundaries, I teach this in all my boundaries courses. And when I work with people on boundaries, boundaries are never about the other person.
Absolutely.
They're only ever about you.
Right.
Like, and oh, they're not respecting my boundaries. And I can't
Mhm.
seem to to get people to listen to, they're not listening to my boundaries. Like, it's
Mhm.
so not about the other person respecting your boundaries, just
Right.
because you have to respect your boundaries. It's the
Mhm.
same as like with a little
Yeah.
kid, where I love using children as example because we're all just giant children.
Yes.
Like, I knew this, like with my kids, if I tell my kids, you do that one more time, we're not going to the birthday party, and they
Mhm.
do it one more time, damn, we're not going to the birthday
We're not
party.
going to the
I have
party.
to mean that. Like, I have to
Right.
mean that, or else they're not going to trust me and they're not going to believe that what I say is true. And they're just
Right.
going to keep doing the thing. And that's not about them. That's about me.
Right.
So if you set a boundary and you're not willing to uphold that boundary, people aren't going to respect your boundaries because
Right.
you don't respect your boundaries.
Yeah. I often ask, like, how do you feel about promises?
Mm,
And they're like, well, like I like to keep my promises. I'm like, okay, well, boundaries then are a self promise.
mm,
That
mhm.
often gets people to go, oh, like, oh, that hurt. I'm like, yeah, it should. It should, because
Yeah.
you are promising something to the self. You are looking at it like it's an outside force thing. It's not,
Mhm.
it's an inside force thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never thought of it. So it is a promise to the self, but think about
Mhm.
how often promises have been broken with us, how much
Yes.
we break. We might value promises,
Hmm.
but even I in my life have been like, I don't make promises anymore because I don't know
Right.
how to keep those promises.
Right? We just throw it out with the bathwater, like, never
Right.
mind. It didn't work anyway, which is where most people's boundaries stand anyway. So, it's fine. For most people, look, let's be honest, working with somebody like you and I or going to therapy isn't always available to everybody. And it's a struggle for a lot of people. When people hear, how do I self own, especially while turning around and trying to look at all this stuff, this tornado, this bullshit that keeps hitting me. How does one step into that path?
Well, I love it. And my first thought is, if you're even here listening, if
Yeah,
you're even thinking about it, you've already stepped
you
on
already started.
the
Yeah.
path. And I think that's some of the really important thing for us to recognize, and where I love to remind people of this as often as I possibly can. Like,
Mm.
you being willing,
Mhm.
your willingness alone
Right.
to maybe even listen to something you might not want to hear, to even listen to a
Mhm.
podcast like this where you're not sure what's going to come up for you, but you're
Right.
willing to step into some kind of unknown and unfamiliar space.
Right.
That right there that is where change happens. And a
Mm.
lot of it is like, it's very faith based
Yeah.
in like trusting that there is something better for
Mhm.
you, and
Mhm.
also trusting that deepest part of you is calling you forth
Yeah.
into your truth and who you really are, into your
Mhm.
authentic expression.
Yeah.
I think that that's something I always really connected to
Mhm.
as I was going through awakening number 1. Awakening number 2 is I had this inkling that there
Mm.
was something deeper in me that was
Mhm.
guiding me and pulling me forth. And then if I
Yeah.
continued to step forward on this path into these unknown things, and I continued to try and
Mhm.
recognize that even if I try and fail miserably, I'm going to be given another opportunity tomorrow, because
Right.
that's just how life is. We are in
Mhm.
constant practice. Life is practice.
Right.
And to continue to just be brave,
Ah,
and,
yes.
but to trust,
Mhm. Mhm.
that, like, you obviously love yourself and care for yourself
Right.
if you're showing up in any kind of space or doing
Mhm.
anything that's taking action towards that, or you have an inkling that you might love and care for yourself, you
Mhm.
do.
And we wanna pause there for just a second and say, that is the very definition of learning to stay with yourself. When you see the path and there's so many what ifs and unknowns, and you do the damn thing anyway,
Totally. Yeah.
right?
That's what
That's
I
the
say to my
thing.
people. You do
Mhm.
the damn thing. I say, do the damn thing already.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just do it.
Try. Yeah. It's truly one of those experiences where we sit back in our shoes and watch people enter into stages exactly where we were, and you wanna say, "I've got you. I got you," and they don't trust, and it's like, "Okay,
Mhm.
you may not trust me right now, and I get it because, It's natural. But what if you pick just one small element of your life, one small evidence piece that says, I have the power to do this because I've already done something very similar in some way. I've already entered a path that I didn't know how it would turn out,
Yeah.
and I'm okay.
Mm.
That's a practice that I hope you take away today is that, as you're thinking about, but I know I have healing or I have these shadows I need to focus on, that I've already done something that scared the hell out of me before. Why can't we use that as the evidence?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that I lean on that often, like,
Mhm.
when I'm having a
Yeah.
moment of fear. I mean, like I mentioned, just because I'm aware of things, it doesn't mean that I don't still feel them, that
Sure.
the fear or the sadness or
Mhm.
those depressive tendencies that I tend to have, but recognizing with time, like
Mhm.
that evidence actually starts to build up over time. So just,
Yeah.
yeah, take whatever little bit of evidence that you have
Mhm.
that you've done this before in some way. And if you can't find the evidence in your own life,
Yeah.
find the evidence in other people.
Yeah, that's a
And
great
that
point.
to me is actually where I started. I
Mm.
started by listening, hearing, finding people that were talking about these things and
Mhm.
then recognizing them in myself.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm hearing you talk about it
Yeah.
so bravely and so vulnerably,
Mhm.
now I know I'm not alone. And if
Yeah.
you can do it, I can do it. And I think
Mhm.
that to me is starting to like continue, not starting, but continuing to reveal itself as one of the number one ways that
Mhm.
we heal, that we change, that we grow. We don't do it in isolation.
Yeah.
We do it
Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
And that to me often is the evidence I've had to use because I can be such a victim
Right. We
sometimes.
all can. We all can.
I am so good at the pity party. I'm so good at it. And I think sometimes the thing that pulls me out the most is actually
Mhm.
other people
Mhm.
who are willing to talk about these things too.
You described a saying that I often will say to the people who come and sit with me, and I'll say, "I'll take your hand, but you have to take yours too."
Mm,
And that's an image that I'll say, "I really want you to think about that, and I'll hold your hand,
mhm,
but I can't hold the other one. You have to hold it, and
mhm,
maybe let's stack our hands together and let's work on this." And I always freely tell my story because you're right. If we know that somebody that we see making forward motion has the same kind of past or something similar,
mhm.
we use it as the evidence.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's so
yeah.
powerful.
I have a similar saying. It's different, but I tell people it's your work to do, but you don't have to do it alone.
Mhm.
Like, and that to me also feels like similar to you. Like, I will hold your hand,
Absolutely.
but you also have to take your own. Like, this is your
Yeah.
work to do. I can't do
Mhm.
this work for you. And
Right.
I am like right here with you. You don't have to go through this
Yeah.
alone. And I've been there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I want you to know too, and everyone knows this, but we kind of have to say it, is that everybody's path and journey is different. So where it
Mhm,
may take Jessica a few minutes and it may take Danielle a few minutes, but it takes you 15 years, so be it.
mhm,
Right. And it's a matter of not getting to the end result. What we're looking for is the systems, the habits, the changes that are happening, the practices, the meditation, the yoga, the breath work, the journaling, the whatever it might be that you're
mhm.
putting in place to satisfy the soul along the journey.
Mm, I like that.
Mhm.
Uh, well, and that satisfying the soul along the journey, there's like kind of to erase the destination, so to
Mhm.
speak, to make all of these things the living itself.
Yeah.
All of these practices, this is what life is now. It's not, I'm going to
Mhm.
do these practices and then I'm never going to do these practices again and I'm
Right.
going to arrive in some nirvana.
Mhm.
It's like we're creating spaciousness
Yes.
through practicing, through willingness to show up, we're creating a
Mhm.
spaciousness in our life for our soul to kind of come. It's like kind of creating little
Mhm.
spaces, and pretty soon there's more breathing room. And it doesn't mean the stuff's not still there, but our container, our capacity for
Yeah.
holding in it, and our ability to touch into the beauty and the peace and the presence and
Mhm.
all the things available to us in each moment,
Yeah.
we're touching into it easier and a little better. And we're now kind of becoming masters at this thing called living life. Life is still
Yeah.
life.
Not
Yeah.
changing.
It's
Not
not
changing.
changing.
It's
Yeah, but we can still have that
yeah.
deep soul satisfaction of
Mhm.
really fully engaging with
Yeah.
life and not running from it. Because I think that's what we desire more than anything, is to be deeply engaged with life, to
Yeah.
feel that soulfulness, to feel that connection, to
Mhm.
cry at a commercial, or
Yeah.
to, laugh at something that's funny, or to be able
Mhm.
to, set a boundary and still be at peace, or to, show up with love when otherwise we would run away and hide. We want to engage.
We have 5 master areas of our life:
Mm,
mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial. They move, right? There's no particular order depending on what we're doing, whether we're
mhm,
staying with ourselves or we're trying to simply get our shit together, you know? But that's really what you're saying, is that if we learn to be in the nuances, in the spaciousness, that somewhere along the way, those 5 are going to quit stacking on top of each other and moving around like dominoes,
mhm,
but they get
mm.
into alignment.
They do.
Yeah,
They really do, and I truly believe that when we work on one thing, we work on everything because
we
it's all
do.
connected. So
Yes.
even if you were just like, "Wow, this area, this particular thing is," and
Mhm.
my life will kind of switch around in terms of where the focus
Yep,
goes,
yep,
in any
yep,
of those 5 quadrants that you
yeah,
just mentioned. You might be putting a lot of attention into one, but
right.
they're all connected.
Yeah.
So trusting that it's when you align to just even one, they're all
Mhm.
gonna come into alignment with it. Yeah.
What do you feel is the biggest problem, quote unquote, air quotes for anybody listening and not watching, that you see or hear of when we're talking about staying with ourselves, when we get into that space of creating the spaciousness?
Oh, I think the number one thing that I see that prevents people is the stories they tell themselves that
Mm,
they're attached to about themselves and about their life and about the world.
uh-huh,
I think the number one thing is, falling into a victim story or an old narrative,
right.
and being so attached to that narrative
Mhm.
as a truth
Yeah.
that it prevents that opening from it keeps you stuck in
Mhm.
a loop and in
Yeah.
a cycle. So I would say it's that narrative that people just get real stuck on and attached
Yeah.
to.
I will always joke and I'll say, "I see your shadow dancing," you know? And they're like,
Mhm.
"What?" I'm like,
Yeah,
"No,
what are
I'm
you
serious.
talking
I
about?
see it." Yeah.
Mhm.
That is a very true thing, that we do get stuck in the narratives. It is the shadow, right? It's because we've taken on the perception of other people. We've taken on learnings that we haven't really kind of devalued, that
Mhm.
actually have no space in our lives. We've
Totally.
taken on everybody else's trauma, their experiences, the things they refuse to clean up. We've from society to our parents to our grandparents to brothers, sister, all everyone. Question becomes, if I was gonna stay with myself, who is this self?
Mm. I love that question.
Mhm.
Who is the self? I mean, we're getting like that question kind of starts to speak into like getting into the deep, like non-self, the
Yeah.
non-self, because it's like, am I my personality? Am
Right,
I the things that have happened to me? Am
right.
I the mistakes I made? Am I my successes? And am
Mhm,
I the amount of money that's in the bank? We start going
mhm.
into those 5 quadrants you
Sure.
listed. Really, am
Yeah.
I my role as a mom? Is
Mhm,
this who I am? Is this the self? Or is there like a deeper
mhm.
self?
Yeah.
That deeper self. And I love to think of that as like my soul self that
Right.
is always constant. One of the best ways I've heard this put, and I think that I find this really, really helpful, is the idea that the soul came
Mhm.
here to have a human experience.
Absolutely.
Your soul wants to be having a human experience, and every single experience that you're having
Yeah.
is a human experience. If you're having the experience and you just so happen to be a human, it
Yeah.
happens to be a human experience. And I like to imagine that my soul is like reveling in it, is
Yes.
reveling in it. My personality
Right.
hates it,
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
soul, that deeper part of me, is like that compassionate being of light that is
Yeah.
smiling with joy, that is like, this is exactly what I came here for.
Yeah.
I came here to know what it feels like to be
Right.
in this body, in this expression of this particular person, in this particular way, at this particular
Yeah.
time, in this particular feeling, and everything that's happening right now is exactly what
Hmm.
I came here to experience. And I
Yeah.
embrace this experience as a legitimate experience. I don't
Yeah.
push it away. I don't wish that it was different. This is
Right.
the experience that I want to be having. And even in that moment, that's when I
Hmm.
come back to myself, is when I can align my personality to say, I choose this experience that I am having. I am
Mm.
allowing for this experience to be happening.
Right.
And I accept this as part of my human experience, because that is all I can have
Hmm.
while here.
Yeah. You literally just wiped the question why away.
Mm,
I
mm,
love the way you just put that because you did. You wiped the question why away.
mhm.
Why is this happening to me? Because you are supposed to feel this. You're supposed to
Mm,
have this as a part of I love the word life. I think that's an important word. We use it a lot, but I think that the word that I prefer, and it has a dirty connotation a lot of times because it's not what I'm talking about, but the word legacy. And
mm,
I don't mean legacy like financial or somebody's going to stand up and, be like, oh, they created such a legacy. But I mean, what did you do that made your soul and yourself feel that you came here and put a mark
mm,
on why you were supposed to be here?
mm,
Legacy
mm,
in that way. But you answered because the why you're here to create that mark through the experience.
mhm. Yeah, and that to take it a step further, we are the mark.
Mhm.
We
Yes.
are the mark in our existence. Just
Mhm.
in our full existence,
Right.
we ourselves are the mark on the world. We don't even need to
Yeah.
make it. We just are.
Yeah.
We just are it. And in some ways, we're allowing life to have its way with us and through us and make its mark on
Right.
us. That impression of, us all being a unique instrument
Mhm.
that life
Mhm.
moves through in these very specific
Yeah.
ways, through the flesh body and through the personality and through the
Yeah.
sound of the voice and through the way we experience it all. Yeah, I mean, we are born into a legacy of
Mhm.
just
So much.
existence itself, like to get
So much.
to get philosophical, right? Like existence itself, what a trip. Like what a
Right,
trip that
exactly.
we exist.
Right.
What is this?
There's so much, yeah. Again, here we are. We'll be back in 50 hours. But, it's so true though, and to just take everything and kinda wrap it up in a pretty little bow for people, I will say to people as they're like, "But I don't know who I am."
Mhm.
Then I'll say, "Okay, great. Tell me who you are without telling me what you do."
Mm,
Okay, tell me who you are without telling me who's mom or dad
mhm,
or brother, sister, daughter, child, grandchild, work title. Tell me who you are.
mm.
Okay, tell me who you are. And it's a very difficult question to answer.
That
Right?
is a very
Tell me.
difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
Even I'm
Yeah.
sitting here thinking, I've asked this question, I've answered this question, and we're just so deeply tied to our personalities and what we do and our titles and our roles.
Hmm.
I thought you were going a different direction with that though. So I'll tell you where I thought you were going.
Yeah.
When you said that people say, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
First off, that's like ultimate definition of like a non-self. And one of my greatest things that I love to encourage people is like, go find out, go
Yeah.
decide who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And that's in many ways the beauty is we get to decide
Right.
every day, in every moment, who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I get to decide the exact sort of person I want to be. I get to meet you
Mm-hmm.
and I get to say, oh, I just love the way that you make eye contact and you are warm and you ask questions, and it gives me a certain feeling,
Mm-hmm.
to feel
Mm-hmm.
seen and to feel like you care. I love that.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, I think I want to be that way too.
Right.
By golly, I'm going to be that way. Right.
Right.
And like
Right.
we decide who we are on so many levels. And if
Yes.
I'm attracted to something in you,
Mm-hmm.
it speaks to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
speaking to an aspect of me that's
Mm-hmm.
already in me. So it already is who I am, allowing it to come forth. So it's in some
Mm-hmm.
ways already written.
Right. Yeah.
And there's
Mm.
the non-self, there's just the soul sitting in there reveling
Yeah.
in it all, and none of it is who we really are, and
Mm-hmm.
all of it is possible.
You answered my next question without me asking, which I was going to say, I can hear the ladies listening and gentlemen would say, but how? How do I do that? How do I go and find out who I am? How do I face the shadow? How do I stay with myself? How? And the answer is discovery.
I can't even
Yeah.
tell you how many people I've been, how many things
Yeah.
I've tried on. Oh, improv sounds fun. I'm going to go try that. Ooh,
Yeah.
going on a date with this person sounds fun. I'm never doing that again. Oh, like I'm going to go, like there's go find out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like go mess around and find out and see what
Yeah.
lands and see what sticks and see what you like and
Yeah.
see what you don't like, and like
Mhm.
pay attention to those things and see what
Mhm.
emerges. That's how I have ended up doing half the things I've ended up
Right.
doing, is just
Mhm.
go find out.
Yeah. It's taking the what if instead of making it a negative, but making it a positive. Like,
Yeah.
what if? What if? What if
What
I
if?
did this? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's everything. I've done so many things in my life, and a lot of them aren't in my life anymore, but I'm so glad I tried them.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That was an experience. That was a
Uh-huh.
story for later.
That's a story for
Right? That's
exactly.
a story
Yeah.
for later. It then gives me the next question that I hear, and I'm sure you do too. What if I fail? I have
Mhm.
a very, very, very firm policy on failure. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm going to throw it out there. I don't think
Let's
I've
hear
ever
it.
actually talked about it on
Let's
the
hear.
podcast
Oh,
before.
oh.
Yeah, so here we are, new, right? Here we are. I don't believe in failure at all.
Mhm.
There is no element of my life, of my practice, of anything I have witnessed or helped somebody through that indicates failure is a real thing for me.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is, and it's not one of those moments of, well, there's a lesson in everything. I do believe that. However, it's more of, were you able to extract something from that moment? And I don't
Mm.
mean by the deep, deep lesson, but I mean, is there just a pin drop of something that allows you to know, I have this in my bank for
Mhm.
when I need resiliency or when I need to do anything? And if
Yeah.
that's the case, how is failure possible?
Mm. Yeah. No, I love that. I have a similar, I would never put it the same way you put it, because I didn't think about it like,
Yeah.
like that, with the pin drop of just there's literally some value in every
Yeah.
experience that we get
Right.
to carry with us. But I have a very strong sense that like failure isn't, as much as I know the feeling of
Sure.
failure and what people mean by
Yes.
failure. The way I think about failure is very much like failure is tied to an expectation.
Oh, yeah.
It's tied to, I'm going to do this thing. This
Mhm.
is how it's going to go. And it doesn't go that way.
Mhm.
And so now we say, oh, we failed.
Sure.
Right. I'm going to show
Mhm.
up at meditation. This is how it's going to go. It's
Mhm.
not going that way. I'm
Right.
failing at meditation. I'm terrible at meditation. I'm probably not going to try that anymore because
Right.
I'm failing at it. I'm going to start a business and I'm going to go out and break down doors and ask everybody if they want to buy
Yeah.
my thing. And I'm going to get 100 no's and no one said yes. And so I'm going to quit.
Mhm.
And so therefore I failed. But 10 years later, I'm going to be thinking to myself, what if I had just knocked on one more door?
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I start knocking on doors again. It's not a
Right.
failure. It is learning, it is lessons. And at the
Yeah.
same time, it's if we can release the expectation of how we think it's supposed to go,
Right.
we can't fail. And it reminds me of that quote, in the beginner's mind, there are
Mhm.
infinite possibilities.
Right.
In the experts, there are few. So
Yeah.
allowing ourselves
Be
to
beginners.
be beginners, to be
Mhm.
new, to be made new
Mhm.
every day, when you
Yeah.
release the expectation
Yep.
to how it's supposed to go,
Yeah.
you free yourself.
Absolutely. I want to
Yeah.
add 2 things to that, if I may. First and foremost, feelings are never, ever fact. We
Mm-hmm.
know that. So you can feel like a failure, but you can't put a tangible fact to it. Sorry, not going to
Yep.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the next piece is if you're looking at the result as a failure,
Mm-hmm.
understand that when we start something, we don't have a distinct and formable outline to get there. So, what you're really saying is, I had the expectation, like what you said, I had an idea of what I wanted the outcome to be. I actually attached to it. So now, because my attachment was there, I
Yeah.
have this sense of not being fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Is that failure, or did you attach to something that you did not have all of the information and you tried to create an outcome sans the information? Right?
Oh, totally. And the information only comes as you move
As you
in
do.
that direction, as you go
Right,
towards it. It's sort of like you can know that you're going to a party tonight or you're going to be
right,
speaking at an event, but do you know exactly, what the tone of the room is going to be like,
right.
how the food is going to taste, if it's going to be warm in there or cold in
Mhm.
there, if the mic's going to work, what the people are
Right,
going to be like, how the thing, you never know.
right.
You
You
can
never
have your
know.
idea, but
Right.
you never really know until
Mhm.
you arrive in the moment what the
Right.
sound, the taste, the texture, the
Yeah,
tone of it's going to be. So
yeah.
stay in the present, move toward it in the physical present moment, and trust that as you arrive to wherever you're headed,
Mhm.
you'll know what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Wayne Dyer's quote that I live my life by. Be open
Mm,
to everything, closed to nothing.
yes. Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Mm.
We have so much more to talk about, and yet we're running out of time. We talked about meditation, staying with ourselves. There's so much that we just walk through. A practice perhaps that you could hand over that somebody could walk away with now and say, in that experience of Danielle and Jessica together, I learned and I am putting this into practice. What would that be?
So simple. It's such a simple practice. And it's one of my favorite practices. I come to it all the time. But if you can just pause, takes
Mhm.
maybe 10, 15 seconds, pause and like feel like your skin, the edges of your body, feel your clothing on your skin, like feel yourself existing in your body in the present moment. You can close your eyes, you can open your eyes and look around you and recognize yourself as an object in this room, in this space, as a physical being in physical form with weight being held down by gravity.
Mm,
Coming closer in, recognizing your heart is beating for you and only for you. Your whole body can only be in the present moment.
mm, yeah.
Thoughts, worries, ruminations, memories are all just happening in the mind in the present
Mhm.
moment. It is taking a moment to just feel your breath moving in and out, to recognize that you exist only right here in the present moment. That is always true.
Yeah.
And if you can just practice that and come into that moment just a couple times a day when you're transitioning between calls or from your
Mhm.
car into the house or standing in line at the store, you could just feel your feet on the ground, feel your skin, feel your breath, listen to the sounds around you, remember where you are.
Mhm.
That to me is such a simple practice. Your mind, even all the stuff in the mind, it's still just thoughts and
Yeah.
memories happening in the present moment. Here you
Very
are.
I love that. I love it. It reminds me, we have new science that came out that says we should be taking 21 deep breaths in distinct pauses throughout the day, not
Mm,
necessarily like 21, breaths itself, but pauses, 21
mhm,
pauses throughout the day. And that seems like a
mhm.
whole lot, but it's really not when you're talking about a scope of 12 hours or so.
Right.
And if you added this space of just feeling the body, feeling the experience,
Hmm.
you are meditating.
You are.
You are.
It's just a little mini meditation,
Mhm.
grounding. Again, it
Yeah.
can take, you can start practicing and doing it for like 15 seconds, and pretty
Mhm.
soon it's like it's just you've trained yourself to where you can
Yeah.
do it in 5 seconds, and
Yes.
everything just comes back in really quick, and you're staying with yourself, and here you are.
Yeah.
Now moving into the next thing.
What a powerful tool for anxiety as well. So
Mm,
use that. That's a beautiful way to slow the mind, the body, the nervous system really beautifully.
really, yes.
Mhm. Anything that we missed? I mean, yes, but
I think we just like walked in and opened 30 doors.
and I love this hallway. I don't even care, y'all.
We're just still in the hallway. We just opened a bunch of doors and didn't go through any of them.
No, we did not. That's okay. That's okay. Maybe this is just the first go round. I'm
Yeah,
totally fine with it.
yeah. I mean,
Oh.
it is what it is. I trust it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know if you've ever listened before, but I end the show the same way. And it is to ask you if you could kindly offer 3 gratitudes that you deeply are attached to and are thankful for today.
Mm, 3 gratitudes. I will start with this. I'm grateful for this. You don't always know what to expect when you show up in a space like this, and this has been wonderful. I'm deeply grateful. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful today that my daughter's actually home today and we spent a little time together this afternoon. And on a deeper level, I will just go ahead and do the thing that I think we feel we're not supposed to be able to do, and I will be grateful for myself
Mm,
today. I will
mhm,
be grateful to me, to Jessica, for all the things I've been through, all the work that I've done, all the ways I've shown up, all the ways that I've been brave, all the ways that I've done it scared,
mhm,
and just
mhm.
take a moment to be grateful for the fact that I've always been on my own side and I've
Yeah.
always been with me through everything. I'm deeply grateful for that self understanding.
Mhm. I just paused. If you're listening, I had my eyes closed because it's so true. We're not supposed to. That's selfish. It's not selfish to honor the experience, the legacy that you're living, creating, moving through. It is something that we need to get better at.
Hmm.
It is something that if we do that, it is the essential of staying with ourselves.
Hmm.
It's permission and self-possession and beauty all wrapped in one.
Hmm.
So, I know we opened a lot of doors and we stood in the hallway and we just threw grenades into them, and you may be like, "Oh, come on now, tell me more." I
Hmm.
hope that you will join me again because I feel like we have so much to still talk about.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to join you again. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and the beautiful alignment that was here today. I know that a lot of people will walk away with something that was meant for them. We both teach on Insight Timer, which is how our connection was made. Can you tell us where you can be found so that other people can also find you?
Yes, happy to. Apart from Insight Timer, you can go to staywithyourself.com. So,
Mm,
Stay With Yourself, which we talked about all day, there's a website, staywithyourself.com. You can find me there. Or on Instagram, it's Jessica Amos. Or
mm,
you can also go to Stay With Yourself on Instagram as well too. And those are the places I hang out the most. But if you go to my website, you'll find lots of resources there. I'd say just staywithyourself.com.
beautiful. Thank you. We'll put those in the show notes. So please go and find Jessica. There's lots of great courses and great information there. Thank you, everyone. And Jessica, thank you.
Thank you as well.
To stay with yourself is such a beautiful choice. It's a witnessing of permission, intention, and action. The wisdom inside this conversation reminds me we never know everything, and it's never too late to learn something new and to put something new into our lives. I can't thank Jessica enough for her time and for the beauty that was created in this conversation. If you would like to follow Jessica Amos, again, you can find her at www.staywithyourself.com or under Jessica Amos, AMOS on Instagram and also Insight Timer. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life and are seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, and now Threads. You can also visit the show notes, my blog, or merch store on my website, getyourlifetogethergirl.com. Please feel free to share this episode with a family member or a friend as it spreads this message to those who may need it most. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.